Good afternoon, everyone. Since we're done tackling about the land ownership in the Philippines under the Spain, so now let's move on to the land ownership in the Philippines under the Americans. But before we go on to our discussion, last time we tackled about the Treaty of Paris, in which Sir Mike sinabi niya ulit kung ano ba nga yung Treaty of Paris, 'di ba? Ito yung agreement between Spain and Americans na kung saan tayong mga Pilipino ay ibebenta sa mga Amerikano with the amount of $20 million ng Spain. So meaning to say, tayo ngayon ay nasa kamay na ng mga Amerikano. That's why ang topic natin today is all about land ownership in the Philippines under the Americans. Kung binasa nyo yung PDF na sinand ni Sir, makikita nyo doon yung ano ba yung start or ano ba yung mga naisip ng Amerikano sa mga Pilipino. Okay. The Americans were aware that the main cause of social unrest in the Philippines was landlessness. Kasi nga, 'di ba? Noon ang lupa ay para sa lahat, ngunit nung dumating ang mga Espanyol, sila ay naghari-harian sa ating mga lupa. Kaya ngayon, ang mga Amerikano, since tayo ay hawak na nila, aware sila na ang pinaka problema natin na kinakaharap is yung kawalan ng lupa. Kaya naman naghanap sila ng paraan or nag-isip kung paano ba masusolusyonan yung mga hinanain ng mga Pilipino. Ayon, they attempted to put an end to the deplorable conditions of the tenant farmers. When we say tenant farmers, ito yung mga nangungupahang farmers na kung saan nagpasa sila ng several land policies to increase the small landholders and distribute ownership to a bigger number of Filipino tenants and farmers. Okay. Isa sa mga significant legislation enacted by the United States is number 1 is Philippine Bill of 1902. It is also known as Cooper Act, and it is a basic law for the insular government that was enacted by the United States Congress on July 1, 1902, and agad itong pinirmahan ni President Theodore Roosevelt noong July 2, 1902. So ano nga po ba yung sinasabi sa Philippine Bill of 1902? Philippine Bill of 1902 provided regulations on the disposal of public land. A private individual may own 16 hectares of land, while corporate landholders may have 1,024 hectares. Ang ibig sabihin, kaya nila parang idinidispose yung public land is para na rin sa mga Pilipino, para sila ay magkaroon ng karapatan kung ano ba talaga yung maaari lang nilang bilhin. So, iyon. So, bakit nga ba nagkaroon ng Philippine Bill of 1902? And para saan ba itong mga ito? Nangangahulugan na para ito sa mga Pilipino upang magkaroon ng karapatan sa malalayang pananalita at pagiging pantay-pantay sa harap ng batas. And the Philippine Commission also enacted Act number 496 or Land Registration Act, na kung saan dito iniintroduce yung torrent system to address the absence of earlier records of issued land titles and conduct accurate land surveys. Ano nga ba yung torrent system? Yung torrent system, it is a system of land registration. If you know the word Maura Decree, kung familiar kayo doon, isa ito sa inimplement ng Spain noong sila ay dumating dito sa ating bansa, which is Maura Decree. Yung Maura Decree na yon, it is a 1-year port title yon, na kung saan dapat noon nung dumating ang mga Spaniards dito sa ating bansa, nagpa-implement sila ng law, which is ayun nga yung Maura Decree, na kung saan dapat sa loob ng 1 year mayroon ng titulo ng lupa ang mga Pilipino. Subalit nga, 'di ba? Ang mga Pilipino ay sabihin na natin na hindi nakapag-aral, kulang sa edukasyon. So, ang nangyari hindi nila nagawa ng paraan kung papaano ba yung mga proseso sa mga ganong bagay, kaya napawalang bahala nila yon na naging dahilan ng lalo nilang pagkalugmok or naging dahilan kung bakit wala sila ngayong masabing kanila. Itong torrent system, di ba nga sinabi ko kanina, it is a system of land registration. Na kung saan, na once na yung lupa mo ay registered na, the owner can rest assured. When we say rest assured, hindi na yun basta-basta maaagaw ng kahit na sino. Which is, yun yung isa rin sa mga policies na ginawa ng mga Americans para masolusyonan yung problema ng mga Pilipino. Okay. In 1903, the Homestead Program was introduced, allowing a tenant to enter into an agricultural business by acquiring a farm of at least 16 hectares. Kasi nga, di ba? Hindi naman pwede na lupa lang ang maaaring magkameron ang mga Pilipino. Dito sa Homestead Program, dito naman inaalaw din yung mga nangungupahan na pumasok sa isang agricultural business nang sa ganun magkaroon din sila ng kita. Okay. However, it was limited to areas in northern Luzon and Mindanao, where colonial penetration had been difficult for Americans. It is a problem they inherited from Spaniards. And sadly to say, land ownership did not improve during the American period. In fact, it even worsened because there was no limit to the size of land holdings. The accessibility of possessions was limited to those who could afford to buy, register, and acquire fixed property titles. Some lands were sold or leased to American and Filipino business interests. This early land reform program was also implemented without support mechanism. Di ba nga sinabi ko na isa ito sa nakakalungkot. Kasi nga 'di ba, alam naman natin na ang mga Pilipino ay mahihirap. So, sino ba yung may kakayahan lamang na bumili ng mga lupa? 'Di ba yung mga mayayaman, mga syenderos? So, lalo pang naging worse yung land ownership kasi yung mga mayayaman, since nga 'di ba marami silang pera, kayang-kaya nilang maka-acquire ng isang property, para siguro ang ginawa nila is bumili sila ng bumili hanggang sa naging wala ng limit yung pagbili nila, and then ano yung natira sa mga Pilipino, 'di ba? Walang natira sa kanila. And then isa pa sa nagpahirap sa kanila is since nung dumating din ng Spaniards dito sa ating bansa, nagkaroon ng utang ang mga Pilipino noon, yung mortgage kung tawagin, na kung saan sila ay nagsangla ng kanilang mga lupa. And then nung dumating na nga yung panahon ng syempre singilan ganun, yung mga syenderos o yung mga mayayaman, pinors nila na kuhain sa mga Pilipino yung kanilang lupa upang kabayaran sa kanilang mga utang. Kaya nakakalungkot mang isipin, but ang mga Pilipino ay talagang sobrang nakakaawa ang mga naging karanasan. And this early land reform program was also implemented without support mechanism. When we say support mechanism, it is a system, or it is any formal system of method. Walang ganun. Kumbaga na-implement tong program na to ng walang formal method. Okay. If a landless peasant farmers receive land, he only receive land, nothing more. Yun nga yung sinasabi ko kanina na hindi naman maaari na wala rin silang pagkakitaan. Sapagkat paano rin sila mabubuhay kung wala silang maaaring gawing business, di ba? yung sinabi ko din kanina, many were forced to return to tenancy, and wealthy Filipino shanderos purchased or forcefully took over lands from farmers who could not afford to pay their debts. The system introduced by the Americans enabled more lands to be placed under tenancy, na kung saan naglad yon ng widespread peasant uprising such as the Clorum and the Sakdal uprising in Luzon. So, ito na yung sinasabi ko na dahil nga sa sobra siguro na hindi na masikmura ng mga Pilipino yung kanilang paghihirap, what? Siguro, nag-ano na sila, nag-rebelde, ganon. Which is yon, the Sakdal or Sakdalista uprising. When we say Sakdalista uprising, it is a peasant rebellion in Central Luzon na nagtagal yon ng 2 days, May 2 and 3, 1935. But it was easily crushed by the government forces. But, di ba makikita natin sa historical events na to na yung social inequality is laganap about sa issue ng land ownership and tenancy in the country. Okay, during the years of Commonwealth, government, the situation further worsened as peasant uprising increased and landlord-tenant relationship became more and more disparate. Okay. Nung si President Quezon na, he laid down a social justice program na kung saan nakapokus yung program niya sa pagbili ng haciendas na kung saan ito'y hahatiin and ipagbebenta sa mga tenants. His administration also created the National Rice and Corn Corporation or NARIC to assign public defenders to assist peasants in court battles for their rights to the land. However, the Commonwealth failed because of many problems such as kulang sa budget for their settlement program and widespread peasant uprising. Naging problema pa yung World War II. 'Di ba nakalagay World War II put a halt to all intervention to solve these problems as the Japanese occupied the country nung tayo ay sinakop pa ng mga Hapon. So, yon, hindi nag-improve yung land ownership nung panahon na ginawa ng paraan ng mga Amerikano, 'di ba? Hindi nag-improve, and then nung si Quezon, kulang naman sa mga budget, and then nagkaroon pa ng sakupan, which is yung mga Hapon ay dumating dito sa ating Pilipinas. So now let's proceed to the second topic. The rehabilitation and rebuilding after the war were focused on providing solutions to the problems of the past. Our second topic is all about post-war intervention toward agrarian reform during the different administrations of the following presidents. But before we go on, let's define first yung agrarian reform. Agrarian reform, it is defined as a rectification of the whole system of agriculture. And if you are asking me, ano nga po ba yung pagkakaiba ng agrarian reform and land reform? When we say land reform, kagustuhan lang ng mga magsasaka na mabahagian sila ng lupa. But then dun sa agrarian reform, hindi lang sila basta mabahagian ng lupa, kundi maitaas din yung level ng mga nasa laylayang magsasaka para kumita. Kumbaga dito, sila ay papasok sa isang agricultural business nang sa ganon magkaroon sila ng kita. Okay, the first president in line is our former president Manuel Rojas. He passed Republic Act number 34 to establish a 70-30 sharing arrangement between tenant and landlord, which reduced the interest of landowners' loans to tenant at 6% or less. And the government also attempted to redistribute hacienda lands, falling prey to the woes of similar attempts since no support was given to small farmers who were given lands. So, kitang-kita naman natin na ang kinakailangan, yung 70% is mapupunta sa mga landlord and yung 30% is mapupunta sa mga tenants. Nang sa ganun, magkaroon ng pagkakaisa or 'di ba hindi man sila sobrang hati but then merong masasabing karapatan na dapat yung mga Pilipino. And gaya nga na sinabi dito, the government also attempted to redistribute hacienda lands. So dito parang nag-attempt sila ng ganitong what do you call that? Yung pagre-redistribute ng hacienda, of course, para sa mga Pilipino kasi nga wala namang binibigay na suporta sa kanila. So, ayun. The second in line president was Elpidio Quirino. The Land Settlement Development Corporation or LASEDECO was established to accelerate and expand their settlement program for peasants. And this agency later on became under the administration of President Ramon Magsaysay. Yung LASEDECO naging NARA or the National Resettlement and Rehabilitation Administration. So, itinatag yon upang maipamahagi ang lupang pambayan para magkaroon ng sariling lupa ang mga mamamayan. And then nakasulat din sa Republic Act number 1199 or the Agricultural Tenancy Act to govern the relationship between landholders and tenant farmers, protecting the tenurial rights of tenants and enforce tenancy practices. So, this act was established para sa mga tenant farmers na nangangahulugang hindi dapat sila pinapaalis basta-basta sa lupain ng mga landlords. And then the Agricultural Tenancy Commission was also established to administer problems created by tenancy. So, the Agricultural Credit and Cooperative Financing Administration was also created mainly to provide warehouse facilities and assist farmers in marketing their products. So, the administration spearheaded the establishment of the Agricultural and Industrial Bank to provide easier terms in applying for homestead and other farmlands. So, parang dito sa Agricultural Credit and Cooperative Financing Administration, kasi nga 'di ba, since sila ay papasok sa isang agricultural, kinakailangan nilang makapag-provide ng warehouse facilities and para na rin ma-assist yung farmers kung paano nila maibebenta yung kanilang produkto. NARA accelerated the government's resettlement program and distribution of agricultural lands to landless tenants and farmers. It is also aimed to convince members of the Hawks, a movement of rebels in Central Luzon, to resettle in areas where they could restart their lives as peaceful citizens. But despite a more vigorous effort toward agrarian reform, the situation for the farmers remained dire since the government lacked funds and provide inadequate support services. So, sa kabila ng effort na mga inattempt nila, hindi rin nag-work kasi nga kulang sa mga pondo, ganun, and hindi rin nila mabigyan ng sapat na support yung gagawin nilang service. A major stride in land reform arrived during the term of President Diosdado Macapagal through the Agricultural Land Reform Code or Republic Act number 3844. Ito ay inenact noong 1963 under nga ni President Diosdado Macapagal Arroyo. So, this code abolished share tenancy in the Philippines and prescribed a program to convert tenant farmers to lessees and later on owner cultivators. It also aimed to free tenants from tenancy and emphasize owner cultivatorship and farmer independence, equity, productivity improvement, and public distribution. In short, kagustuhan ng code na ito na magkaroon ng private lands ang mga farmers. But despite being one of the most comprehensive pieces of land reform legislation ever passed in Philippines, Congress did not make any effort to come up with a separate bill to fund its implementation. So, ayun. Hindi rin nag-improve or hindi rin nagawa ng paraan yung kanilang mga minimithi or ina-attempt na maging solusyon para sa mga Pilipino. The third topic, the agrarian reform effort under Marcos. We all know that our former president, Ferdinand Marcos, ay isa sa matagal na laluklok bilang president dito sa Pilipinas. Year 1965 until 1986. And siya ay pang-sampu sa naging president dito sa Pilipinas. So, President Marcos declared martial law in 1972, enabling him to essentially wipe out the landlord-dominated Congress. And through his technocrats, he was able to expand executive power to start a fundamental restructuring of government, including its effort in solving the deep structural problems of the countryside. So, yung martial law nag-start noong September 23, 1972 until January 17, 1981. And to sum up, ito ay tumagal ng 9 years. And during his term na kung saan nag-declare siya ng martial law, naging daan ito para ma-wipe out o mapuksa ang mga landlords na may authority o mga matataas, which is pabor iyon, di ba, sa mga taong walang lupa. And since siya ang president who declared martial law, ibig sabihin, kontrolado niya ang lahat. And through his technocrats nga, he was able to expand executive power to start a fundamental restructuring. Kumbaga, kung noon yung government is hindi nag-improve, so through his technocrats, kumbaga parang meron uling panibagong focus yung kanyang gagawin para sa mga Pilipino. Okay. So, our primary sources, Presidential Decree number 27 or the Code of Agrarian Reform of the Philippines, became the core of agrarian reform during Marcos regime. So, this shall apply to tenant farmers of private agricultural lands primarily devoted to rice and corn under a system of sharecrop or lease tenancy, whether classified as landed estate or not. When you say landed estate, ito yung mga taong may malalawak na kalupaan. So, yung number 1, the tenant farmer, whether in land classified as landed estate or not, shall be deemed owner of a portion constituting a family-sized farm of 5 hectares if not irrigated and 3 if irrigated. So, yung nangungupahan na magsasaka na nasa lupain mananaw uri bilang nga yung sabi ko kanina, may malalawak na lupa o hindi, ay dapat ituring na may-ari ng isang bahagi na bumubuo ng isang pamilyang sakahan na 5 hektarya kung ito ay kung hindi patubig at 3 hektarya naman kung ito ay patubig. So, in all cases, the landowner may retain an area of not more than 7 hectares if such landowner is cultivating such area or will now cultivate it. And the total cost of land, including the interest of at the rate of 6% per annum shall be paid by tenant in 15 years of equal annual amortization. Ang kabuuang halaga ng lupa kasamang interest sa rate na 6% kada taon ay kabayaran ng nangungupahan sa 15 taon ng 15 katumbas na tamang amortisasyon. In case of default, the amortization due shall be paid by the farmers cooperative in which the defaulting tenant farmer is a member with the cooperative having a right of recourse against him. No title to the land owned by the tenant farmer under this decree shall be actually issued to a tenant farmer unless and until the tenant farmer has become a full-fledged member of a duly recognized farmers cooperative. So, walang titulo ng lupa ang nangungupahang magsasaka until yung isang magsasaka ay hindi nagiging completely developed member of a duly recognized farmers cooperative. So, title to land acquired pursuant to this decree or the land reform program of the government shall not be transferable except by hereditary succession or to the government in accordance with the provisions of this decree, the Code of Agrarian Reform, and other existing laws and regulation. So, dito, ang titulo sa lupang nakuha alinsunod sa kautosang ito ang programa sa reforma sa lupa ng pamahalaan na kinakailangang hindi mailipat sa kung sino man yung isang lupa unless ikaw ay or unless ipinamana ito sa iyo. So, the Department of Agrarian Reform through its secretary is hereby empowered to promulgate rules and regulations for the implementations of this decree, which means ang department na ito binibigyang kapangyarihan na magpahayag ng mga tuntunin at regulasyon para sa pagpapatupad ng atas na ito. And then dun sa Operation Land Transfer, on lands occupied by tenants of more than 7 hectares on rice and corn lands, commenced and through legal compulsion and an improved delivery of support services to small farmers, agrarian reform seemed to be finally achievable. Under the Rice Self-Sufficiency Program, the Masagana 99, yung mga farmers ay pwede silang humiram sa isang bank and makabili ng 3 hektarya ng lupa and agricultural input. Kaya lang, the landlord class still found ways to circumvent the law because only rice lands were the focus of agrarian reform. Some landlords only needed to change the crops to be exempted from the program such as coconut and sugar. So, dito nakahanap pa rin ang landlord ng paraan para makaiwas sa batas sapagkat ang programa ay nakatuon lamang sa rice. Yung Masagana 99 is primarily devoted to rice and corn. So, some landlord kailangan lang palitan ng ibang crops for them to be exempted gaya nga nung coconut and sugar. So, sa madalit salita, hindi pa rin nag-improve yung kagustuhan ng mga Pilipino na magkameron ng lupa sapagkat nung time na sila ay parang finally achievable na yung kanilang problema is yung landlords pa rin yung nanguna or sila pa rin yung may karapatan kung papaalisin ba nila yung mga tenancy sa kanilang kalupaan or hindi. And since nga yung landlords yung parang nagwagi doon, so need nila na mag-evict ng mga tenancy at humanap ng ibang workers na kung saan ang ginagawa is or ang trabaho is yung para naman sa sugar and coconut. So, ayun. Since we're now done to tackle about agrarian reform effort under Marcos, we will now proceed to post-1986 agrarian reform. And dito, yung pagpapatalsik kay Marcos noong 1987 ay nagresulta ng panibagong interest and attention to agrarian reform. So, 'di ba after ni Ferdinand Marcos, syempre siya ay napatalsik na. Pinalitan siya ngayon ni President Corazon Aquino, ang ating pang-11 na president. So, as President Corazon Aquino envisioned agrarian reform to be the centerpiece of her administration's social legislations, na kung saan mahirap sa kanya because her background betrayed her. Kasi nga 'di ba? She came from a family of a wealthy and landed clan that owned the Hacienda Luisita. And 'di ba yung earlier yung topic natin is about yung pangangamkam ng mga hacienderas sa mga poor farmers, yung 'di ba kinukuha nila yung mga lupain ng mga Pilipino even wala na silang pagkuhaan ng kabuhayan o wala na silang masabing lupa, 'di ba? Na kung saan 'di ba, mahirap kay Corazon Aquino kasi nga nakalagay dito na yung background niya ay nagbetray sa kanya kasi siya isang mayaman at kilala na mayroong malalawak na lupa. So, noong July 22, 1987, Aquino issued Presidential Proclamation 131 and Executive Order 229, which outlined her land reform program. And in 1988, the Congress passed Republic Act No. 6657, or the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law, or CARL, which introduced the program with the same name, Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, or CARP. So, dito, it enabled the redistributions to agricultural lands to tenant farmers from landowners who were paid in exchange by the government through just compensation and allowed them to retain not more than 5 hectares. So, yung CARP was limited because it accomplished very little during the administration of Aquino and accomplished only 22.5% of land distribution in 6 years, owing to the fact that Congress dominated by the landed elite was unwilling to fund the high compensation cost of the program. So, parang dito, yung kanyang program is nakatuon sa pagdidistribute ulit ng agricultural lands para sa mga tenant farmers na galing iyon sa mga landowners. Na kung saan yung pagbibigay ng mga landowners na yon sa ng lupa para sa mga tenant farmers ay babayaran ng isang gobyerno through just compensation, and inaalaw sila na mag-retain ng hindi hihigit sa 5 hektarya na lupa. And then, yun nga, yung CARP is limited siya kasi sobrang kakaunti lang yung na-accomplish nung time na iyon, mahigit lang na 22.5% of land. And it was also mired in controversy since Aquino seemingly bowed down to the pressure of her relatives by allowing the stock redistribution option. Hacienda Luisita reorganized itself into a corporation and land and distribution stocks to farmers. Under the term of President, CARP implementation was speeded in order to meet the 10 years time frame. And despite limitation and constraint in funding, logistic, and participation of involved sectors. By 1996, the Department of Agrarian Reform distributed only 58.25% of the total area target to be covered by the program. So, to address the lacking funding and dwindling time for the implementation of CARB, Ramos signed Republic Act number 8532 in 1998 to amend CARB and extend the program to another 10 years. So, ito naman is para tugunan ang kulang na pondo at ang lumiliit na panahon para sa pagpapatupad ng CARB. Nilagdaan ni Ramos ang Republic Act number 8532 noong 1998 para amyandahan ang CARB at palawigin ang programa sa another 10 years. So, iyon. So, our last topic, Carper and the Future Agrarian Reform. Okay. Carper is a law with an intention to extend another law. This another law is CARP. The Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, or CARP, is a 20-year-old program of the government from 1998 to 2008, and on 2009, former Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, our former president, approved the CARPER, or a Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program extension with reform. As of the year of expiration of the CARP of 2008, there are more or less 1,600,000 hectares of agricultural land that is needed to be distributed to the farmers' beneficiaries in approximately 1.2 million farmers. So, kung papansinin, ang mga figure na ito is lumalabas na hindi epektibo ang implementasyon ng mga nakaraang administrasyon. Makikita naman natin kahit nung sa mga nakaraang mga nagpa-implement. Dahil dumaan ng higit kumulang na 2 dekada, ngunit hindi pa rin naipamahagi ang dapat maipamahaging lupa para sa mga magsasaka. So, Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, or CARPER, is an mandatory law na nag-e-extend ng deadline ng CARP for 5 more years, which is from 2009 to 2014. And as of 2014, which is yung mandated deadline ng CARPER law, nakapag-distribute sila ng 1 million hectares of land to the 900,000 farmer beneficiaries. There are 2 government agencies assigned to fulfill the CARP and CARPER, which is the DNR, or Department of Environment and Natural Resources, and DAR, which is Department of Agrarian Reform. Kaya lang, even with the combined efforts and resources of 2 agencies, they have proved to be incapable of fully achieving the goal of the agrarian reform in the Philippines. So, bakit? Kasi even after ng duration ng CARPER, there are still 500,000 hectares of agricultural land ang hindi na distribute. So, the same problems have plagued its implementation. The powerful landed elite and the ineffectual bureaucracy of the Philippine government. Until these 2 challenges are surmounted, genuine agrarian reform in the Philippines remains but a dream of Filipino farmers who have been fighting for their right to land ownership for centuries. So, ayun, makikita natin na dito sa mga policing ito na hanggang sa kasalukuyan, 'di ba? Parang hindi pa rin nabibigyang kasagutan. Kumbaga, nakakaawa ang mga sinasapit ng Pilipino patungkol sa agraryong pansakahan. So, yun lang po. Doon lang po nagtatapos yung aking report, and I hope you learn something. Thank you po. Thank you.